So there's something about ADHD that a lot of people misunderstand and mislabel and don't know much about, and it really causes a lot of problems. And today I wanted to share with you what that thing is that a lot of people don't know about, and I also want to share with you one tip that can really help that thing. Let's dive right in. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Matt Ryan. I'm a therapist in private practice. I own a group practice located in New York City, but we serve clients across the state of New York virtually, and we specialize in ADHD therapy. The practice is called PRGRS Therapy, stylized as PRGRS. If you're interested in learning more about the practice or you want to work with us, feel free to click the link down below. You can read our website and even schedule a free 15-minute consult. Let's actually just dive in now. And so the problem that I'm talking about that many people are not aware of is that people with ADHD deal with emotion regulation issues. That's right, people with ADHD have a hard time regulating emotions. Now, this is not everyone, but broadly speaking, this is an issue that's associated with ADHD. Now, if we take the mental health world in general, people often make associations with emotion regulation problems and other mental health disorders. So you might think about borderline personality disorder, you might think about bipolar disorder, but it's not often that people associate emotion regulation problems with ADHD, although those two things exist together. And this could be a real problem. Let's just imagine for a moment that someone is really dealing with emotion regulation issues, right? And someone immediately associates that with borderline personality disorder. But this is very different than having emotion regulation issues and having ADHD. The treatment approach could be totally different. So you can see with just that simple example that there could be real consequences if we don't understand this correctly. And aside from formal diagnosis issues, people often associate emotion regulation issues with being short-tempered or having anger problems or being overly irritable, and they just simplify it that way. But this is really not the case, and in fact, it's an oversimplification, and in fact, it doesn't explain at all what's going on. In fact, the emotion regulation issues can be part of the way the person's brain are wired. And in this video, we're not going to get into all the nitty-gritty scientific detail, but if we think about ADHD for a second, it impacts our executive functions, right? Now, I made other videos about executive functions, and it's a complex topic, but simply put, executive functions help us with decision-making, working memory, setting goals, these kinds of things. And if you think about what's required to regulate emotions, decision-making, impulse control, the ability to stop and consider and regulate, these are largely related to the executive functions, right? It requires strong executive functioning to regulate emotions. And if people with ADHD have a hard time with executive functions, you can imagine that it's going to be hard to regulate emotions. So I want people just to be aware that one of the issues people with ADHD deal with is emotion regulation issues. And we definitely can't just write this off as being irritable or being angry all the time. That is not correct. So then what might it look like for someone with ADHD to have emotion regulation issues? Well, like anything else, it's going to be different for everyone, right? We're all unique individuals. But one common issue we see is the challenge to regulate frustration or being irritated or anger, right? And what often happens is people with ADHD will become angry very quickly. And again, there's a lot of reasons for this, or they'll become irritable really quickly, or at least it appears really quick, but there's a lot brewing beneath the surface. And then there'll be kind of that moment of overwhelm. And then there could be some sort of lashing out or some sort of reaction, whether that be yelling or something else. And then this is usually followed by a lot of guilt and shame. And we will see this pattern kind of over and over again, right? Does this explain everyone's experience? No, but it is a common one that we see often. Now that we're all more informed, I wanted to share one distress tolerance skill that can really help with emotion regulation that comes from DBT, or Dialectical Behavior Therapy. This is a treatment that was designed back in the late 70s, early 80s by a person named Dr. Marshall Lenehan. It's become fairly popular over time, and it really has shown to be helpful for ADHD. And this is because it involves a lot of distress tolerance, emotion regulation, mindfulness, these kinds of things. Although it was originally designed for borderline personality disorder, many of the interventions that are taught can be very helpful for other issues as well. And one of the main areas of DBT is called distress tolerance. And as you guessed it, this helps people deal with distressing, overwhelming situations and feelings. Now, it's more of a reactionary skill, meaning we're going to use it when we start to feel overwhelmed. It might not prevent being overwhelmed, but it can prevent us from getting to the point that's way too overwhelmed. Now let's imagine a thermometer for a second, and we're rising up a little bit, right? We're starting at 60 degrees and now we're at 80. If we use this distress tolerance skill that I'm going to talk about, it might keep us at 80 or bring us down a little bit and prevent us from going all the way up to 100. So that's the way you want to think about this skill. And this skill is called the TIPP skill. Now DBT loves its acronyms. That stands for TIPP, temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, and paired muscle relaxation. Let me bring you through each one of those and explain to you why we use this skill. And one reason why people love the TIPP skill so much is because it changes our biology. It's not so much we're changing how we think or saying positive thoughts or anything like that, but it's really intervening at the biological level, almost like medication. When you take a medication, it impacts your biology, your chemistry. This is similar, but obviously non-medication based. And people like that because it's sometimes hard work to have positive thoughts or to reframe thinking. So that's why people really like it. So let's dive right in. And it's also really important to put the TIPP skill into context. Remember, this is a distress tolerance skill. And so we're going to use this anytime we feel overly distressed or overwhelmed by emotion. We're not going to be using the TIPP skill on a daily basis every single day, right? For maintenance purposes. We're really using this TIPP skill when we begin to feel overwhelmed or we are feeling overwhelmed to calm ourselves down or to prevent us from getting to 100. So the T stands for temperature. Now what we're going to do with this is going to sound a little strange, but you're going to get a big bowl or some sort of large container that can hold cold water. You're going to fill it with cold water. You're going to fill it with ice. You're going to make it very cold. And then you are going to submerge your face. If this is your face right here, you're going to submerge it into the water. Hold your breath for a little while. Don't make it too uncomfortable. Come out, go back in, come out, go back in. And we'll do this several times and you'll start to notice that your heart rate will decrease and you'll begin to feel a little bit more calm. And what this is doing is invoking the human dive reflex. And the human dive reflex is activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is in charge of quote unquote rest and digest, right? But it's lowering our heart rate. It's helping us feel more calm. Whereas the sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. And that's activated when we become overwhelmed. So when we dunk our face in and come back out and invoke that human dive reflex, we're actually increasing the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system and in turn regulating our emotions. Now, the most effective way to do this is through the cold water inside the bowl with ice, but I also understand that we all don't have access to that all the time. And although not as effective, you can splash cold water on your face near a sink if you're available, hold ice packs, things like that. So there's alternatives, but nothing is as effective as submerging inside the water. The I stands for intense exercise, and although going to the gym is fantastic, this is not the same thing. And the theory behind this is that when we're overwhelmed, our body is filled with adrenaline, right? And that adrenaline needs to go somewhere. You can't just sit or quote unquote calm down. There's actual adrenaline in your body that needs to come out. And one way we do that is by intense exercise. And so what we could do are things like running in place, push-ups, jumping jacks, anything that's accessible that will get your heart rate up. And again, the whole point of this is to disperse the adrenaline, and in turn, we will begin to feel more calm. And finally, we have the P and the P, paced breathing and paired muscle relaxation. So paced breathing is quite simple. We're gonna breathe in maybe for 4 to 6 seconds and exhale for 6 to 8 seconds, something like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now, as we do this, the same thing is happening that happens with the human dive reflex. We are increasing the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system, and in turn, we're becoming more regulated, right? And we're decreasing the activity of the sympathetic nervous system or the fight or flight. And this happens through the paced breathing. Now, a bonus is the other P, the paired muscle relaxation. I won't walk you through the entire thing, but essentially what it is it's starting at the top, working way to the bottom, and it's putting attention on your muscle, tightening it and tensing it, holding it for a few seconds and letting it go, moving down, tightening and tensing, letting go, and moving down. But you can do this in conjunction with the paced breathing. And this just helps bring our attention to something else, which can be very helpful if we're overwhelmed by something going on around us and we really need to get our attention onto something else and be a little bit more grounded. And so these 4 skills make up what's called the TIPP skill. TIPP. But my encouragement to people is practice these ahead of time before you're distressed, because it's not easy to just think about this when you are feeling overwhelmed. But if you've practiced a few times and you have things prepared, well, then it'll be much easier to give it a try. And so now you know that people with ADHD deal with emotion regulation issues, and now you have a new skill that can help you regulate emotions as well. At the end of the day, I hope this video was helpful for you, and I hope you learned something. If you're interested in working with our practice, or you want to just read more about our website, check out the link down below. You can schedule a free consultation. We would love to hear from you. Now, keep in mind, this video is not any clinical advice. It's not legal advice. It is simply for educational purposes only. Okay, so hopefully you found it helpful, and we will see you in the next video.